What is going on, my friends, and welcome to the Monday edition of the Playoff Stochastic NHL Strategy Show. I am your host, Josh Harris. Big 10, big being relative, on DraftKings here tonight. $15K to first. For regular season, that's not too big, but for playoffs, we'll take what we can get. And decent other contests, like I know they're not great, but you can still at least win $1,000 in the single entry, which towards the end of the season, you'd be lucky to win $250 in some of these single entries. So we'll take what we can get. It is a 4-game slate, something that I'm excited about because we had a 2-game slate on Saturday with the Eastern Conference teams, and I'll get to you in a second, but we watched these Eastern Conference playoff games, and the Islanders played the best that they could through 40 minutes. The Hurricanes played awful, and they still bodied the Islanders. The Rangers didn't play great, beat up on the Capitals. Florida-Tampa was a pretty good game, but I think Florida's forecheck is going to be a big problem in this series for Tampa. And then the Leafs-Bruins, the Leafs just looked atrocious the other night. So, I'm excited to get some Western Conference games on the slate. Western Conference is going to be insane. You saw, Colorado, Winnipeg last night was nuts. But, joining me, as always, Slim Cliffy. How you enjoying the playoffs so far?
Yeah, going from yesterday afternoon's games, Florida-Tampa was fine. I mean, it wasn't like a barn burner or anything. It was a fine game. Washington, New York, there's 4 minutes left in the first period, and the Caps had 2 shots. You know what I mean? I think they had a decent second, and then fell apart again in the third. And then you go watch Winnipeg, Colorado, and you're like, these are all the teams in the same
league,
same playoffs. And once the East gets past the first round, I think it's pretty fair to assume that the Rangers and Carolina are going to get through. Once you get to Rangers, Carolina, and then, the 2 winners from the other series, then you're really cooking. It's just the middle of the East is clearly a lot weaker than the middle of the West. We have the same Eastern Conference games today that we had on Saturday. Carolina's fourth line did work. We talked about ice time. Kotkaniemi didn't finish quite with the least amount of ice time. I think Mason and Kuznetsov were both lower, but Kotkaniemi listed, quote, as the second line center had 11 minutes. That's kind of the problem with what Carolina is going to do is the first line's going to get ice time, and the third line is probably their actual second line at this point. So that's just something to take note of. We'll talk about Carolina in a little bit, but yeah, we got Vegas and Dallas, Los Angeles, Edmonton hitting the ice here tonight, starting their series off. Vegas getting Mark Stone back, getting Alex Pietrangelo back just at the right time. And then Los Angeles, Edmonton meeting again in the playoffs, 3rd year in a row, I believe. So a little bit of a rivalry brewing there. Vegas, Dallas, if Vegas is healthy, playing to their potential, they're one of the best teams in the league. Should be a really good series. Looking forward to tonight's slate. Good contest, good games. I love the playoffs.
Yeah. The last, we always show up prepared, very prepared, but the last 5 weeks of the regular season doing shows was a bit tough, with all these teams just tanking and stuff, playoff hockey. I'm revigorated a little bit here. Before we get into it, we have a $20 super chat from Greg. Thank you very much. It says, thanks for a great season, guys. Thank you for supporting us through the show with the super chats and all that. I don't you guys, if you are in the Discord, thank you for being in the Discord. I don't know Discord names to whatever, but thank you so much for the super chat, and we appreciate your support.
Yeah, thanks a lot. We certainly do appreciate it. We weren't really sure if we were going to still be doing shows in the playoffs, and it's just been the support of the audience, of the viewers, of the people in the Discord, of people on social media that have really kept this show going. And we're here to help you guys. It's nice to see people win. It's nice to see that we've helped people along. So I like to think of it as a little bit of a symbiotic relationship here. But thanks a lot for the $20 super chat. Hopefully we can help some winners in the chat here tonight.
Yeah. get into the slate. Toronto Maple Leafs 2.6 total heading to Boston. The Bruins have a 3 total. Looks like Willie Nylander is going to be out again. He did skate before the show or before in the morning. Yeah, no worries, Greg. Like, you don't have to be in the Discord. I've always said you don't have to go premium. If you do, thank you for the support. Nylander looks like he's going to be out tonight. At first they said it was an issue, but then like maybe he tripped and fell down the stairs trying to get to the toilet or something. I don't know. Something happened off ice. We won't know until after the series. He probably like broke his tailbone or some shit and he's still skating. But regardless, he's out tonight. Toronto did run power play units at morning skate, and Bertuzzi was there. They did take him off in the middle of the game for Calle Jarnkrok last game. Why? Sheldon Keefe searching. Cool. I don't know. Like the analysis is still kind of the same, right? Because this game's in Boston. It doesn't really change until they switch cities. So yeah, I do like Boston 1 here tonight. They have the highest top 2 stack on the slate, which is surprising because Edmonton's on the slate, 24.1% top 2 stack, 25.3% projected ownership. My analysis is still kind of the same. I know Cliffy was a little bit higher on Boston 1. For me, it's more of like a Pasternak one-off. You want to add in Heinen. I don't think you need to full stack. Now it's a 4-game slate instead of 2. That's where the analysis changed a little bit. I think you're better. Like, I think you can. It's more likely that you can full stack for me. You know what I mean? I still don't think you have to do it, but for 4-game slate, you try to get more correlation. 2-game slate, you just kind of like throw spaghetti in a wall, whatever sticks kind of sticks, but you can full stack. I'm still more in the pasta one-off camp. I was a little bit higher on Boston 2 than Cliffy was. Now, they didn't do shit at 5-on-5. Let's be real. They did nothing on 5-on-5. It was DeBrusk on the power play. And that's just going to be the issue for Toronto all series. Their penalty kill sucks. And Boston is playing a little bit chippy, and they're getting Reeves and Domi to take stupid penalties. If the Leafs are going to take stupid penalties in the series, they're going to get swept out of the building. So I'm fine with Boston 2 from the standpoint that they're fully correlated on the second unit. So they're coming in with a little bit negative leverage, and there are a couple lines in the 14K range that I do like a bit better. But I think you can take 1 or 2 of those guys as well. Again, I got a Trent Frederick empty net goal for my hat trick pick. The analysis still stands there. Like, you get Geeky on the second power play unit. You get Frederick on – he's not on either unit, but he plays decent minutes. They're going to get bottom 6 matchups from the Leafs. And you do have some expensive stuff on the slate. If you want to power play stack Edmonton, something like that, you're going to need some salary relief. So I don't mind Boston 3 here. On the Toronto side, it's going to be the Toronto top line again. 21% top 2 stack, 19.9% projected ownership. Kind of hope Bertuzzi stays on the power play there. I like Toronto 1. That line has been very, very good offensively. Toronto 2, they don't interest me as much as a full line. I think a one-off Tavares is fine, one-off Marner is fine, but it is Toronto 1 for me. But I do like Boston a lot better in this game.
Yeah. I think a couple notes about game 1. First is they didn't use Pasternak in the shutdown matchup basically at all. They kept him out pretty exclusively against the Tavares Marner line, which, that's not a bad matchup. Especially because the Matthews top line had actually been fine defensively. In fact, that Toronto second line, especially with Nyes, not very good defensively. Like Tavares and Nyes, 3.2 expected goals against per 60 minutes of 5-on-5, 2.6 actual goals against. Like those are below average numbers. Marner should help, but didn't really do a whole lot in the first game. And, you and I talked about on Saturday, like, it feels like he's been playing injured basically all season, like literally from game 1 of the regular season. I know he missed time and then came back. I still don't know if he's fully healthy. So it was interesting to see Pasternak, kind of be pushed into what should be a tougher defensive matchup. And Pasternak only played like 16 and a half minutes in that game. They were, Boston was using their depth a lot. The only Boston forward, I think over 13 even strength minutes in that game was Brad Marchand. Everybody else was like 11 to 13 minutes. Like they spread out the ice time pretty evenly now. Playing with a lead helps. You don't have to chase goals or anything like that. So I think that's one thing to keep in mind is like if Boston gets out to like a 2-0 lead or something, maybe Pasternak only plays 16, 17 minutes and not 19, 20 or 21 or something like that. It makes me a bit nervous on Boston 1. Boston 1, you're right, man. Like they're still carrying so much ownership. 25.3% ownership at 17,400. A big reason why this slate is different than Saturday's is, 4 games, double the games, but more expensive lines. If you just, full on stack Edmonton 1, it's over 21K. If you go to an Edmonton power play stack, it gets way more expensive. You can make it an expensive Vegas power play stack as well. Like on Saturday, it was if you're playing Carolina 1, then you're limited in what you can do. If you weren't playing Carolina 1, you could do basically anything that you wanted. And that's not the case here today. I'm still kind of in on Boston 1 as well. Pasternak, Zaka, Heinen. Like they didn't play a lot. They didn't look bad in that first game, I thought. It was the Boston second power play unit, that DeBrusk unit that really broke the game open for them. I think that's why Boston 1 and Boston 2 are both back in play here. It's that Toronto penalty kill is just not good. I wrote up in that picks article, again, free to read, Stokastic.com. It's up on the site today. 16th by shots against, 26th by goals against per minute over the final 6 weeks of the season. And it was basically just as bad if you go all the way back to like January. So if Boston's power play can look as good as they did, you're right. Like they're going to beat Toronto's brains in here. I would list some Boston 1 than Boston 2. I'm not as high on Boston 3. Boston 3, for as good as Boston looked that game, that line got destroyed at 5-on-5 in that game. That Lauko, Geeky, Frederick line, they had like 4 shots on goal. 2 shots against. 0.4 expected goals against on 2 shots allowed. Like these guys did not do that well in that game. The Boston second line was actually even worse. 0.3 expected goals against, only 0.1 generate. Like I know it's fun to make fun of the Leafs. The Leafs hit a bunch of posts in that game. If a couple of those posts go in, it's a completely different game. I know you can play the what if game for Boston on the other side as well, but like it didn't feel like a 5-1 game to me. You know what I mean? Boston capitalized on their chances. So I actually don't mind the Toronto side here, like going back to Toronto, especially where you have a big contest, that big $10 today on DraftKings. You do have to kind of worry about ownership a little bit. That Matthews top line, 17,500, 20% ownership, so less than Boston. And you get Bertuzzi on the top power play units. So now you get 2 out of 3 on the top power play. I do like going back to Toronto 1. I'm going to be honest. I think my favorite Toronto stack here is probably Toronto 3. Robertson, Yarncroc, Holmberg. I know it might feel a little bit weird, but there is a very expensive Edmonton stack later in the slate. I wrote up Calle Yarncroc in the picks article back when we thought he was on the power play, but he's not going to be. But Yarncroc and Nick Robertson together this season, 34.8 shots, 3.5 goals per 60 minutes of 5-on-5. That is really, really good scoring depth on the third line. We talked about that with Carolina 4 on Saturday. They're kind of in that same boat. Now, they don't get the power play time, which kind of differentiates them a little bit. But I think they have pretty good matchups against Boston's bottom 6. So I'm not in so much on the Toronto top guys in this game. I'm in on the third line. I think they are one of those lines that you can use alongside Edmonton or even an expensive Vegas stack or power play stack or something if you need something really cheap. So for me, it goes Boston 1, Boston 2, then Toronto 3. I'm not in so much on the Toronto guns.
Yeah, I mean, Austin Matthews won off perfectly fine. He can, snap his slate in half if he wanted to. But before we go on to the next game, just want to let you know if you're looking to elevate your DFS game, and why wouldn't you be? You can during the Stanley Cup playoffs. You can use Cup Week. Follow the link in the chat at the checkout. Use Cup Week, and you can save 50% on a weekly NHL data subscription or code CUPMONTH to save 33% on a monthly subscription. So follow the link in the chat that the Stochastic bot just put in there. Cup week, Cup month, get yourself some discounts, and we'll see you in the Discord. Still in there talking some sauce. Daily deposit Frostback still giving out his goalie picks. So just stack against. Let's get to the Islanders with a 2.2 total heading into Carolina. The Hurricanes have a 3.2. Carolina looked awful. Like, maybe not awful. Maybe that's a strong word, but they didn't look great. Islanders played as well as they could. They still look like they got suffocated.
Especially in that third period. That third period, once Carolina came alive, that's when you saw the difference between the two teams. It was one of those things where I don't know how the Islanders could play a better road game in Carolina, and they still ended up losing. That's when it kind of hit me like, this could pretty well be a sweep.
Yeah. So, I played Carolina 1 the other night. They didn't do anything. I still like them. They played poorly. Gensel missed 8 nets. That dude couldn't hit water if he fell out of a boat the other day. So, you go right back to them. They were still generating. They just weren't hitting the net. I'm fine with it. That second line, Netch's, Teravainen, Kotkaniemi. Cliffy mentioned the minutes concerns with Kotkaniemi. I would probably just go to that third line. I think it's Svechnikov one-off is perfectly fine, but if you're looking to get in expensive Edmonton, you can go Stahl Svech, Martinook Svech, something like that. Even Stahl Martinook for super, super cheap, I think is fine. They're going to go out against Horvat, Barzal, Cizikas. They're basically the second line. I know they're Carolina 3, but they see a fair amount of minutes. So I much prefer the third line to the second line. I think a Netch's, Teravainen one-off is fine, but it'd be Carolina 1 for me, then Carolina 3. Actually, I think a Svechnikov one-off might be my favorite play on Carolina as it is. On the Rounder side, in single entry, it is impossible to prioritize them, especially on a 4-game slate. Even on a 2-game slate, we were struggling to figure out ways to play them. On a 4-game slate, it is just brutal. All the road teams have a 2.6 total, and then the Islanders have a 2.2. It's just a miserable matchup. If anything, it would be Nelson, Palmieri, Holmstrom. I don't think I'd full stack. Maybe I'd one-off Palmieri. Maybe I'd one-off Nelson. But I'd probably, if I have any Islanders in my single entry lineup, it would probably be a Pelech or a Pulak or someone like that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really have a ton of interest in the Islanders either. That game on Saturday, you and I were talking, we were basically in on maybe some cheap depth, some defensemen, that's about it. And if you look at the way that they ran the blue line, I made note of this in the picks article because I did write up Adam Pelech for his ice time. This is what I wrote. In game 1, he was 4th among the team's defensemen by total ice time, but there were just 50 seconds separating him from the leader. This was a game that was pretty tight throughout, and they basically just ran their top 4 defensemen pretty much equally. That's what kind of makes it tough to go to Noah Dobson, basically. I think Ryan Pulak is still fine, but we'll talk about defensemen later. But they were spreading the ice time pretty equally along the blue line. Makes it tough to really rely on the high price guys on the blue line. And then you look at the forwards, the Islanders top line wasn't that bad in the regular season with Cizikas there. 3.6 expected goals, 3.8 actual goals per 60. They're just going into a brutal matchup. Like I said, I don't know how the Islanders could have possibly played any better than they did in game 1 going into Carolina, which is probably the toughest defensive team in the league, both at 5-on-5 and on the penalty kill, if not, top 3 at both. And they still lost. And they only got 1 goal. And the 1 goal was basically a jam, flub rebound play by the third line center. Speaking of which, Jean-Gabriel Pajot back tonight. He'll be between Pierre Engvall and Anders Lee on the third line.
It may actually hurt them, if we're being honest.
Yeah, Kyle McLean goes and gets the team's only goal and then gets demoted. Congrats, kid. So, Islanders 1 going up against that, either the Stahl line or the Aho line, one or the other. It's just a brutal matchup. Islanders too. Like, I think they're fine because they do get power play time, but I think this is a case where I would go back to Islanders 3. Like, I'm not a fan of JG Pajot, but that line is not expensive. They're 9,200, right? And they actually had a decent game against Carolina. They're going to see the depth. They're not going to see much. Like, they will see some of the Aho or some of the Stahl line, but not much. They will see more of those second and fourth lines. And that's where Carolina can kind of be had defensively. And, Lee and Pajot weren't that bad together this season. 3.2 expected goals for, 2.4 against per 60 minutes and 365 minutes together. Now, they didn't score a ton, shooting 7%. You wouldn't expect them to score a ton, but the fact that they were just able to generate around the net, like especially in playoff time when the refs are going to let a little bit more go around, around the net, being able to get to the net that much. I do kind of like Islanders 3, or at least like a Lee Pajot 2-man stack or something like that. But this is a Carolina game for me. I really do like the top line again. They were really good towards the end of the regular season, 3.3 expected goals, 4.1 actual goals per 60 minutes. They had 13 shot attempts at 5-on-5 as a line against the Islanders, but only 4 shots on goal. So they were generating a fair bit in that game. They just couldn't find the net. And it's only one game. Like, don't read too much into those type of things. I would read more into the larger sample. And the larger sample is that Carolina one was really, really good when Jake Gensel joined the top line. And it's still a really good power play matchup for them. So back to Carolina one for me. I agree with you on the Stahl Svechnikov line. In fact, I wrote up Svechnikov in the picks article today just because his shot rate was so much higher playing with Jordan Stahl, like up to like 24 shot attempts per 60 minutes, which is like a 50% increase over what he did over the course of the season playing next to Jordan Stahl compared to playing anywhere else. And also, Jordan Martinook had the 4th most ice time amongst their forwards.
He was their best player in the playoffs last year. So
yeah, and he had the most ice time of any forward not on the top line. So you get a lot of ice time, hopefully, from Martinook. You get a better shooting line for Andrei Svechnikov. I'm not a Jordan Stahl fan, but I think the wingers at least are certainly fine. So Carolina 1, Carolina 3. I think going back to Carolina 4 is honestly perfectly fine, but with a slate where you have more teams, I don't feel the need to go to the 4th line as much. If you want to one-off Nason or something like that for power play because he's cheap, I think that's fine. I just don't know about full stacking. For me, it's Carolina 1 and Carolina 3.
Yeah, like I'm fine with the Kuznetsov one-off, Nason one-off, but I'd be hard-pressed to get past Carolina 3 in my single entry.
Yeah, and we'll get to defensemen, and Tyler Frostback just mentioned it in the chat. Carolina also spread their ice time amongst their defensemen as well. Like, they had cut back Brent Burns' ice time towards the end of the regular season. I thought it was just like giving him a little bit of rest, when they had things basically wrapped up and were sure to second place and all that. No, like, he only played like 20 or 21 minutes in that game. Like, Orlov played 17 and a half minutes or something like that, where there was long stretches of the season he was playing 14 or 15. We'll get to defensemen at the end, but these were 2 teams that were spreading the ice time pretty equally amongst their top 4 defensemen.
Yeah. I mean, that's probably by design right now. They'll probably keep doing that until they lose a game. But, we'll see. Maybe I'm just being facetious. Vegas Golden Knights with a 2.6 total. Heading into Dallas, the Stars have a 3 total. See a question from the Toad. Do you fellas have any concerns about ice time for Stanky Leg in the postseason? I don't. Usually you see these guys get signed out of college right to their teams, like Chris Kreider did it with the Rangers, and he got thrown right into the mix. As long as he's healthy, he'll see his normal allotment of minutes on that 3rd line.
It depends what you mean by normal, because like his first 10 games or whatever after the call-up, he was getting 16, 17 minutes. The last few weeks of the season, he was closer to 13 minutes.
Well, they were also coasting, and the first 10 games Sagan was out. So
but that's what I kind of mean. Like, why Johnson was still playing 17 minutes, more than Pavelski and Hintz, but they were still only playing Stankoven 13 minutes most of the time. That's one thing that kind of worried me.
I mean, you kind of
Like put it like this: if they're up 3-1 in the third period, you're probably going to see like Dodonov or Faxa or Steele or one of those guys maybe take a shift or two from Stankoven.
Okay, yeah, that's fair. I don't really worry about his line mates. So
yeah, I'm not worried about Johnston or Ben. I think they'll get like 17, 18, and then like around 15 or whatever. But I could definitely see Stankoven only playing like 12 or 13 minutes.
Possible, but like they're not going to like sit him for
like he's not going to get benched and then not get a shift in the third period or something like that. It's just I think there might be a shift here and there where they put out somebody from the fourth line because it's a defensive zone faceoff or something.
Yeah. It's not like the NBA where they're going to sit Stankoven in game 2 for load management. You know what I mean? So like, yeah, he's going to play. It's just a matter of how much. Mark Stone's back. I mean, listen, Leafs fans are going to bitch about it. It's only the Leafs fans. It's actually more than the Leafs fans, but the Leafs started this. Vegas is just better at it. Okay. He also had a lacerated spleen. So how do you enforce?
I think the funny one is Evander Kane playing with a hernia all season. They weren't like, hey, go get some rest in March. We'll put you on LTIR and go trade for somebody. He just kept playing right through it. It's like if the other teams aren't going to take advantage, at some point it's on the other teams for not taking advantage of this.
Yeah, it's just like it's in the CBA. It's not just Vegas can do it. Tampa's very good at it. They bend the rules better than any other franchise, and they win a lot because of it. Now, that injury was actually serious. Not that back injuries aren't serious. We've dealt with some serious back injuries ourselves, but like, how do you enforce it? You can't. So these teams are just
it's not like Vegas is the only one. Like Aaron Ekblad suddenly ready for game 1, right? Like there's that instance right there. There was somebody else. Was it? No, because I was thinking of Hedl, but Hedl didn't play. So yeah, Aaron Ekblad, it's like misses 3 weeks, and then he's ready for game 1. It's like, wow, everybody's just kind of copying Vegas now.
And then Vegas, they have actuaries in the basement of the arena just working on this stuff. They're just really good at it. So whatever. Bacon's fired up about this game. So Dallas running their same lines. It's Robertson, Pavelski, Hintz, Duchesne, Sagan, Marchment, Wyatt Johnson, Ben, Stankoven. Vegas going Eichel, Marchessault, Barbashev, Stone, Hurdle, Stevenson, Carlson, Mantha, Howden. They are healthy scratching Pavel Dorofeyev. I'm going to kick it to you for a minute and see what they're yapping.
Yeah. I was kind of miffed that Pavel Dorofeyev is getting scratched. He's one of the guys that's really come on my radar this season. And it was weird that they decided to scratch Dorofeyev because he is a guy, even though he's not a physical guy, he's very good at getting to the front of the net. Like that's kind of where he makes his living for shots and goals, is getting like within 15 feet of the net, being able to kind of give himself some spacing and get open. You and I were talking before the show. I think it's one of those things where by like game 3, you see Dorofeyev in the lineup, but he's not playing today. They're putting Howden with Carlson. The interesting thing about Howden and Carlson, they didn't get a lot of ice time together this season, but in over 60 minutes, they were very low event. 49 shot attempts for, 49 shot attempts against per 60 minutes. Like league average, I think for and against was about 56, 57. So they were over 10% below average by shots for and against per 60 minutes each way. So this is it's a fairly low event line. And where, Carlson's on the second power play unit now. They don't really have a shot at getting top power play time back. I'm not in so much on Vegas 3. I think they're fine, but I'm not in so much on them. Vegas 2 is where things get interesting because Stone's been out for a while, obviously. And it's easy to forget that before he got injured, him and Stevenson weren't playing that well together. On the season, 425 minutes for Stone and Stevenson, 2.6 expected goals for, 3.3 expected goals against per 60, 2.4 actual goals for, 2.5 against. Vegas is pretty notorious for having higher expected goals against numbers than goals against. I won't go into explaining it. A lot of it is just got to do with big defensemen kind of taking away some shooting angles. But the fact that they weren't scoring and that they weren't really generating anything is the big problem. Now, Thomas Hertl is good enough to fix that, but Stone hasn't played in 2 months. Stone and Stevenson weren't playing well this season. Hertl looked good in his brief stint. I think he had, 5-6 games towards the end of the regular season, but they don't have any time together as a line. So how that all comes together and against what I think is the most complete team top to bottom in the league in Dallas, that's just a really tall task. So just by virtue of what we know what we're going to get, I kind of like Vegas won the best of the 3 lines, even, factoring in the $19K cost. Now, Vegas won, not getting that much ownership, 5.7%, 12.5% top 2 stack at $19K. On DraftKings, Vegas won 2.8 goals per 60 minutes of 5-on-5. I mentioned Jack Eichel in the picks article today. Eichel had 12 goals, 24 points in his final 21 games this season, averaging 5 shots per game. And I even looked after Hertl got there, he still had a handful of games where he was playing 22, 23 minutes because they weren't assured of a playoff spot. It seems to me, maybe with Stone back, they trust that second line a little bit more, but I still think Eichel's going to be at 20 plus. And I know Marchessault won the Conn Smythe last year. Eichel led the team in points. He's still a really good player. He generates a ton of volume. Going into Dallas is brutal. After they got Chris Tanev, they were a top 3 team at 5-on-5. They were a top 3 team on the penalty kill. They have 2 great defense pairs. They have 2 great defensive line, or at least good to great defensive lines in the Johnston line and the Robertson line. Duchesne line not as good defensively, so they're not going to see much of Eichel anyway. It is a pretty tough matchup for Vegas. I don't think I would necessarily prioritize them in single entry, but that Vegas top line, especially if you're playing in that $10 and you're playing a bunch of lineups, I might have 1 or 2 of them. Jake Ottinger looked really good down the stretch. Again, Dallas was a really good defensive team, but once you get to the playoffs, especially in the Western Conference, they're all good defensive teams. You can't just avoid them in perpetuity. Just look at Winnipeg, Colorado last night. Winnipeg, arguably the best defensive team in the West from start to finish, gave up 6 goals. It is the playoffs. If Vegas is clicking on all cylinders, they are one of the best teams in the league. So I do like Vegas 1 in MME. Other than that, it would just kind of be picking one-offs. Should also mention, if you're playing on FanDuel, Mark Stone is $3,000 today. There's your free square for the day. But Vegas 1 for me over the rest, even factoring in their price. On the Dallas side, I don't have a ton of interest in Dallas 1 for a number of reasons. 1, at no point this season were they getting much ice time. 2, Jason Robertson, by the end of the season, was a full shot per game less than what he put up last year. None of those guys were volume shooters this season. So even if they score a couple goals, if you're playing on DraftKings, I don't think you can reasonably rely on some sort of shot bonus from any of the 3 of them. And that's tough. And the other thing is the power play. By the time Stankoven and Johnston and Johnston and those guys were on the second power play unit, they were basically going 60-40 power play split. So that Dallas second power play unit is going to get their fair share of ice time. Now, Vegas doesn't take a lot of penalties. Least penalized team in the league on the season. Only 2.6 minor penalties taken per game over the final 6 weeks. So playing pretty disciplined. But that second power play unit will get a fair amount of ice time. And I think there will even be games in the playoffs where they just flat out get more than the top unit. That's just kind of the way that they've been running things. So not in so much on Dallas 1. I'm in more on Dallas 2 and Dallas 3. Now, it's a matter of which one you want to go with. I don't know if you have a particular preference. I like Dallas 2 here, Duchesne, Seguin, and Marchment, for the sole reason that they are perfectly correlated on the power play. They'll play the second power play unit with Wyatt Johnston. Duchesne, Seguin, and Marchment, I think one of the big surprises of the regular season. That's what I mentioned in the picks article. I don't think anybody expected this. Like, this line had a higher goals rate than the Panarin line from your very beloved New York Rangers. I think like that's absolutely insane how good they were. And they won't get a ton of ice time, but they're considerably cheaper than the top line, over $4,000 cheaper on DraftKings. They're perfectly correlated. They're going to get what I think are some pretty soft matchups against the second and third lines from Vegas. It's, I know the top line from Vegas didn't have great expected goals numbers, but they had great goals against numbers. The third and fourth lines really did not. So for me, it's Dallas 2 or Dallas 3. I would probably roll Dallas 2, but I think both are very much in play. And then on the Vegas side, it's pretty much Vegas 1 or bust. So I will also mention, we should mention Vegas 2 is perfectly correlated on the power play, but Dallas was the best penalty kill after they got Chris Tanev. So,
yeah. So for Dallas 2, Dallas 3 argument, my favorite player from those two lines is Wyatt Johnston. My favorite stack is the Duchesne line, if that makes sense. It also depends on your build, right? Because the Johnson line is a couple thousand more expensive. So, if you're trying to jam in something, it makes more sense to play the Duchesne line. I do like Wyatt Johnson a bit more than anyone on the Seguin line, but I do like the Seguin line better as a whole. I agree on the Vegas side, it would be Vegas 1. I'm fine with one-offs on the second line just because they're fully correlated. I think Hurdle or Stone makes some sense. Stevenson, we've talked ad nauseum about Stevenson. Stevenson and Stone, awful numbers together. It was with Stevenson at center. Maybe Hurdle stabilizes that line, but I'd rather go to the line. Like the Jack Eichel disrespect around the league is just insane. Like the Sabres beat writer campaign about hating Eichel is just bananas, and like he's an unbelievable player. So yeah, I'd go to that top line. But for me, it would be the Dallas second line. I do like the Dallas third line. But, I don't think you need a full stack. I think Wyatt Johnson one off, Jamie Benn one off is fine. Let's get to the last game here. Los Angeles Kings with a 2.6 total heading into Edmonton. The Oilers have a 3.3. This is the third year in a row they're going to be meeting in the playoffs. This is the deepest Edmonton team since Connor McDavid, which is kind of insane considering how many top draft picks they've had. But they're Edmonton going McDavid, Hyman, Henrique, Draisaitl, Nugent Hopkins, Fogle, and then bottom six, whatever. I mean, there is Evander Kane down there. Kings lines are a bit weird. They kind of how they were at the end of the season. It's Kempe, Kopitar, Laferriere, Arvidsson, Moore, Deneau, Fiala, Lewis, Lizotte, Byfield, Dubois, Grunstrom. I have a hard time believing that Laferriere is going to stay there all game if they're losing. You'll probably see Byfield move back up. You'll see Fiala move up. That's the issue. Like, there's two issues, right? Kempe, Kopitar, Laferriere, they're going to see a fair bit of McDavid, Hyman, Henrique. McDavid and Hyman have ridiculously good numbers together, no matter who the third wheel is. Yad Henrique, he can hang. He's actually a pretty good defensive forward as well. So I do worry about LA1, so I'm probably out on LA1. LA2 is probably my favorite line, just from the fact that we know they're going to stay together. We know they're good, and we know they're probably going to see a fair bit of that Draisaitl line. So if anything, for me, it would be LA2. I think a Fiala one-off is fine. The issue I'm running into with PLD, Byfield, Grunstrom, as a line, I don't mind it. I just have no faith it's going to stay together. If this game gets out, like Edmonton gets out to a 2-0 lead or something, you're going to see Byfield move up. So for that reason, I kind of just prefer LA2 here. Edmonton side is where it gets more interesting because Edmonton 1 is 21,400, 24% top two stack, 9.6% projected ownership. They're not fully correlated. Henrique isn't on the top power play unit. In this instance, I don't think it matters. Normally, we're just kind of like, we really want to prioritize the power play guys. I think going full Edmonton 1 here is perfectly fine. LA is a good defensive team. They have a good penalty kill. It's just, it depends on the guy in net, what's going on between the ears. If he plays anyway halfway decent, it should be a fairly low-scoring game. Knock on wood, McDavid's in the game. We saw, Colorado, Winnipeg just go absolutely nukey. So, I still think going full Edmonton 1's fine. I don't particularly love Edmonton 2 as a full line. I know Draisaitl and Foegele have pretty good offensive numbers together, but that more Danault Arvidsson line has been very, very good. If you want to add in Draisaitl to a stack, you want to add in Nugent Hopkins to a stack for some power play, that's perfectly fine. Do I want to get down into the third and fourth lines? Kane one-off is fine. I think McLeod one-off is fine, but that's really just grasping at stuff here. I'm more about the Edmonton big guys here, and I like full stacking Edmonton 1.
Yeah, Adam Henrique's not just like some guy that they're just throwing on the top line.
He's actually good.
Yeah, he had 24 goals this year, 22 goals in 62 games last year, and that's largely playing for a very, very bad Anaheim team. Like this is not just like some throwaway let's try Matthias Janmark on the top line or something like that. It's not that. And I did mention that you mentioned how good that they've been basically regardless of the third wheel this season, talking about McDavid and Hyman, and I wrote that up in the picks article. 626 minutes at 5-on-5 with anybody but Leon Draisaitl as the third wheel, 4.2 expected goals, 4.7 actual goals. Like we're talking like Evander Kane, Nugent Hopkins, so on and so forth. Like Adam Henrique's in that same kind of tier with them. Now they're all different players. Kane is a volume shooter, Nugent Hopkins more of a playmaker. I'd say Adam Henrique kind of splits the difference between the two a little bit. He should be perfectly fine there. The Kings' top line with Laferriere was not very good defensively, not near as good as they were with Quentin Byfield, certainly. 56 shot attempts against, about league average. Like that Kings' top line was great defensively all season. To be league average with Laferriere there by shot attempts, that's not good. And 3 expected goals, 3.6 actual goals per 60 at 5-on-5. I have the same feeling you do, is like we're going to get to the middle of the second period. Kings are going to be down like 1 or 2-0, and Laferriere is going to the fourth line, and they're putting Byfield on the top line again. So that's my worry about stacking Kings 1. I think Kings 2 is very much in play. As good as offensively as Foegele and Draisaitl were, they were giving up shots defensively. And it's been kind of the same for Draisaitl and Nugent Hopkins as well. 2.6 expected goals against in 155 minutes together. So that's about league average. The Kings' second line is more than good enough to take advantage of league average play. That Kings' second line coming in with 10% ownership, which is pretty much bang on their top 2 stack percentage. I think they're perfectly fine here. The thing is like if you're looking for like a 15K-ish line, you got a perfectly correlated Vegas second line just sitting right there. Like that's
total.
Yeah, exactly. And the Dallas top line's only $700 more expensive. So like that's kind of the issue I'm running into. Like if I were to play anything on the Kings, it would be the second line. They were good in their limited time together. 3.2 expected goals, 3.1 actual goals per 60. Arvidsson's on the top power play unit, all that good stuff. It's the only line that I'd have interest in full stacking from the Kings. Otherwise, like I don't have any faith that any line except that one is going to stay together. Like I feel like Byfield could go to the top line. Pierre-Luc Dubois joins Kevin Fiala on the second line. Like they just really jumble things if they get down 1 or 2-0 or something. So Kings 2. Other than that, bunch of one-offs. Edmonton, it's Edmonton 1. I think Edmonton power play is kind of in play here for 2 reasons. One, this is a team that will lean on their top guys. If this game is close, McDavid and Draisaitl could both easily play at least 25 minutes.
And that man, they're playing a lot of shifts together too.
Yeah, and that's not an exaggeration either. If you go look at last season, there was a regulation game, a game that finished in regulation where McDavid played over 30 minutes in the playoffs against the Kings. Okay. He is going. It's a different coach with Knobloch there. I can't imagine he's going to be like, no, I want to keep McDavid, rested and reserved for game 2. It's like, no, he's going to get a lot of ice time. So Edmonton won, very much in play. I'm not in like you. I'm not in so much on Edmonton 2. Edmonton 3 is kind of interesting to me, just because like McLeod and Perry were actually good together this year. 3 expected goals, 2.7 actual goals per 60 minutes. The thing is like, unless you're like 6-man stacking Edmonton, it's like, why are you dipping down to Edmonton 3? It's basically just to play them with Carolina, right? So like, there's just not a lot of instances where you need to dip down if you're using that Edmonton third line, but I think they are in play. So Edmonton 1, Edmonton power play, Edmonton 3, Kings 2, everything else is just one-offs for me.
Yeah, agreed. Coming up after us, 5 p.m., MLB Live Before Lock with Greg and Bellman. 6 p.m., NBA Live Before Lock with Josh and Eric. And then the playback live watch-along stream at 7 p.m. Check that out. Let's talk a little bit about defensemen here. Maybe we'll talk a little bit more about defensemen than a little bit. But I think at the top of the board, like, it would probably just be Bouchard and Pietrangelo that kind of stand out for me. Like, Theodore isn't on the top power play unit, which kind of ruins his value. He still could get there 5-on-5, but Noah Dobson, like at 6K, not on the top power play unit, he's getting 50 seconds more time than Adam Pelech. You know what I mean? So why pay 6K for Dobson? Like, he could go off, but like, for me, it would be Bouchard, Pietrangelo, Hannafin, McAvoy, and Riley.
Yeah, Bouchard, number 1. I did mention in the picks article, Los Angeles' penalty kill kind of slid towards the end of the season. 23rd by shots against, 11th by goals against. 11th isn't bad, but they were closer to 15th than they were to 10th because there was a pretty big gap between 10th and 11th by goals. So, I do think Bouchard is very much in play. He should get his fair share of ice time as well. In the mid-price range, I wrote up Charlie McAvoy just because, that power play time. He played over 25 minutes. He'll block some shots if Toronto actually generates some shot volume. So I like McAvoy. Thomas Harley as well. It's not a great power play matchup for Dallas, so I'm not worried about Harley power play 2 or anything like that. And he won't play as much as Heiskanen, but he won't be that far behind. So I don't mind Harley. Burns and Shea. Like Brady Shea, he was honestly the guy that stood out, other than Svechnikov for Carolina in game 1. Brady Shea was the guy that stood out more than anything. It seems like he was trying to basically like do it all, like break the puck out, carry the puck in, get shots from the blue line, block shots, all that kind of stuff. Don't mind Brady Shea. Cheap defenseman. I wrote up Adam Pelech just because, like I said, if those top 4 are all going to play equal amount of minutes and it's a brutal power play matchup for the Islanders, I don't see a reason to necessarily pay up for, Dobson or even really Pulock now that Pulock's in the 4K range on DK, be Romanoff or Pelech. Esa Lindell for his block shots for Dallas as well. Kevin Shattenkirk still, running one of the power plays for Boston. So if you don't want to pay up for McAvoy, I think going down to Shattenkirk is fine. Dmitry Orlov, 2,800. Like I said, he was getting close to 18 minutes in that game against the Islanders. Don't mind him. Joel Edmondson, 2,500. I'm not a fan of Joel Edmondson, but he's going to have to throw himself in front of a lot of shots if he wants to have any value in the eyes of the coaches. Like, that's his game. So mid price 2,500, I think that's fine. Andrew Peak, 2,700. He got reasonable amount of minutes for Boston. If he's going to play reasonable amount of minutes in a team with a good total, I don't mind him for 2,700. But I think I'd rather play Orlov at 28.
Yeah, I do like Orlov. If you can't get to Orlov, Jalen Chatfield also.
Yeah. Also, I forgot to mention Hannafin. I know you brought him up, but even with Pietrangelo back, I still think there's a good chance that Hannafin leads that blue line in ice time here tonight. So
yeah,
certainly don't mind
Shea guys. Well, I'm pretty sure one of my neighbors is either family with Shea or just huge fans because everything on their house is NYR 76. So, which was Brady Shea's number for the Rangers. So,
okay.
Anyway, let's talk a little bit about those demons in between the net. If they go back to Freddie, I'm perfectly fine with that. That would probably be the spend up option. Like Stewie Skinner is probably an interesting spend up option as well, just because Kings are pretty high volume. Like every goalie is probably in play for me again. Like Samsonov would probably be my least favorite. But Varlamov, like the Canes missed a ton of nets in that game. The volume still stands. So, like, if you need a volume guy, it is Varlamov. Like, again, like, if you're in the hot, like, I'm fine with Thompson, but I would prefer Ottinger. I like whoever's starting for Boston. Like, I don't think I'm going to spend up, so I don't think I'm going to get above the Boston starter. But, like, again, I don't mind Skinner or Anderson. Like, Anderson has legitimate shutout upside, and Skinner has volume and win equity.
Yeah. I wrote up Aiden Hill, Logan Thompson starting. It's kind of funny. I don't know about funny, if funny is the word, but
funny how?
Do I amuse you? Yeah. Because Logan Thompson had a great start to the year last year, right? And then he got some injuries, didn't play that well, all that stuff. Aiden Hill took over and then, eventually led them to the Stanley Cup. This year, Aiden Hill had a great start. Logan Thompson had some injuries. And then Aiden Hill faded down the stretch. And now Logan Thompson's starting the playoffs. That kind of symmetry is wild to me. But I do like Logan Thompson. Dallas is a shot volume team. Vegas has enough scoring that they can pull a Winnipeg and win 7-6 or something like that. But I feel like if they get out of this series, it's not going to be because Logan Thompson has an 885 save percentage. It's going to be because he plays pretty well. So I do like Logan Thompson on the road. Assuming Allmark starts for Boston. I mean, it's whoever starts for Boston. I'm assuming it's Allmark. But whoever starts for Boston, I don't mind. Stewie Skinner, 8K. The Kings really have trouble scoring. Like, you can see by the way that they've arranged their lines. They don't have faith in anybody except for that second line. So I really do like Stewie Skinner. If you want to go back to Varlamov, I think going back to Varlamov is just fine. 7,200. The thing is, like, unless you're playing Edmonton, there aren't a lot of reasons for big savings. Like, I guess Carolina, but like that's just kind of the way I look at it. So I guess it depends what you do with your lineup. Varlamov's perfectly fine, but I'm a fan of the 7,600 and above goalies on DK tonight.
Same. Who you looking for your hat trick pick?
Wrote him up in the picks article. Turned into one of our personal favorites here on the show. I'm going with Mr. Wyatt Earp Johnston.
Yeah, with that name, he can't play for anyone else besides the Dallas Stars. Like, he would not fit in Seattle with that name. No one fits in Seattle. It's way out in the middle of nowhere. I'm going Andrei Svechnikov.
Yeah, I like it. I think this feels like a game where Carolina just kind of steps on their throat and is like, this is serious. We have to play 2 more games after this, but this series is over.
It's kind of like Mike Trout so far this season. He's just kind of like, do you remember us? You know who I am?
Yeah,
like, exactly. It's going to be one of those games. Yeah. I depending on what the contests look like tomorrow, we could be back tomorrow. We just have to kind of play it by ear with what DraftKings drops. If they're anything similar to today, Cliff and I will talk about and we'll probably be here, but it is DraftKings dependent. Putting our faith in their hands feels bad, but it is what it is. We'll let you guys know in the morning in Discord with a tweet. But good luck, everybody, tonight, and win some of that dinero.
Good luck tonight, everybody.